Welcome to the Art of Faith podcast. I'm Joshua Kapczynski, be your curator for today. This podcast is brought to you by Granite Creek Gardens, which is a brand new wedding venue in the college town of Claremont. So if you're looking for a spot to get hitched, or if you've got some kids that need to get married, I want you to consider Granite Creek Gardens. Beautiful outdoor venue. It currently will be priced extraordinarily well because we're just getting off the ground, and we would love for you to check us out. So more information on the notes below on Granite Creek Gardens. We're also brought to you by Granite Creek Community Church. So looking for a home church, once you consider joining us, either online or in person, we want you to be encouraged. We have a vision of seeing families and culture transformed by heaven. We try to do that with the mission of being relational. So I want to encourage you to join Granite Creek Community Church if you're looking for a place to connect and find friends and find meaning and find hope. We're the spot for you. So today's topic, this is going to be a part 2 of last week's The Art of Destruction. I know it's not the most uplifting thing, but in light of what has just happened on the Hawaiian island of Maui, and specifically in the little town of Lanai, it has been such just a devastating situation in Maui, and that little community. Like, they're still, I mean, we're a little over a weekend, and they're still finding bodies, and they're still sifting through stuff. Like, since the last podcast I did, kind of highlighting the art of destruction and what happened there, it's been worse than I was able to report last week. And so Lahaina is it's a beautiful little downtown community. And if you're listening or watching locally, you know that we have a beautiful little downtown area called the Claremont Village. And so it would be on par if the Claremont Village burned down. Like, that would just shock our psyches. That would just completely devastate us, because not just Claremont, but even the surrounding areas, like almost our identity is kind of wrapped up into that little community, that little downtown section, because it's such a hub for art and culture and the such. And so that was Lahaina. Lahaina, it's on the coast, and it's an old town. It's an old whaling village that's been there for 200 years. So it's just bizarre that out of 200 years, that it's just this year that the winds blew at the right time, and it sparked a flame that burned down an entire town and killed hundreds of people. So it's just mind-boggling that happened. There are conspiracy theories swirling around the situation, and I don't have the data or the mindset to go after that, but the locals are not happy, and they shouldn't be happy, because the warning sirens didn't sound. They didn't shut the power off when the winds were blowing. And so people are asking why did this had to happen at this scale, this scale of destruction. The conspiracy is that large corporations want the piece of property, which, if you're watching the news, that doesn't seem too far-fetched. And so anyway, we just need to be praying for the people, and making sure that their rights aren't being taken advantage of. So Lahaina, again, cute little downtown area, and then my family is personally connected to it. My parents own a condo in Lahaina, so they're in that city. Now, they're a good 8 minutes away from that downtown area that burned. Their condo was completely fine, and I believe I talked about this last time, but their housekeeper's house was burned down to the ground, and she lost everything. And not only did she lose her house, she lost her livelihood, because there's not going to be any tourists coming in. So my parents aren't going to be renting their condo. They're not going to be able to do the Airbnb thing for a while, because they lost all of their bookings in one day. That means that the housekeeper lost her jobs in one day. And so we've taken up a special offering for her. Her name is Priscilla. We'll be cutting the check tomorrow. So by the time you see this podcast, it will be too late to give in the bulk that we are. But if you want, you can still give. We'll make sure that she gets it. I think she's getting probably close to $1,000 from our connections and our friends. And so I want to thank everybody that gave towards Lahaina. And then specifically towards Priscilla, the individual housekeeper that lost everything. But we also are giving a decent chunk of money to King's Cathedral Church in Maui, and that's a great organization to support too. So you can go to their website, you can Google King's Cathedral and give directly towards them. My opinion is that they will make sure that the people on the ground are being taken care of and ministered to, not just financially, not just practically, but they're going to minister to their spiritual needs because we're dealing with levels of brokenness that money can't fix. This is a shock, and that's kind of what I want to get into. And that's what I want to talk about is just kind of the level of brokenness. But before we get into that, it's just kind of interesting that my dad was there like when the fire broke out, and he was actually even tempted to go downtown. He was there working. He was there installing an air conditioning unit into his condo, and he after he got it installed, he's like, I'm bored, I got nothing better to do, I'm gonna go downtown. And then he was just kind of prompted not to go downtown. And I mean, if he would have been stubborn, like, I don't know, I mean, he might not be here right now. That's how close he was to the situation. He tried to get out of the city the next day, and they wouldn't let him out. He had to drive all the way around the island to get into the airport. And he had to well, he ended up sitting next to somebody that's going to help with the rebuilding of Lahaina. And so it was just interesting. I mean, I'm not saying that it was good. I'm just saying, like, despite the tragedy of this whole situation, there was a silver lining in that. Well, one, my dad is here. He's alive. He made it back. Took him a week to get home. But two, maybe there was connections that can help other people that he was able to make. I don't know, but I'm just the whole situation was just weird, and it felt the whole thing felt surreal, and we're not exactly sure like what was going on. Now, I want to talk about the whole concept of mass destruction. So like this whole city, entire neighborhoods were just burned to the ground. And you just like you have to ask the question, why God? And if we're going to get into the art of faith, concepts and talking about the art of faith, the problem of evil is right up there because like it's that age old question, is why do bad things happen to good people? Now, I'm sure like in those fires there were some horrible people, and there were some sinners involved, and they lost everything, and you could probably say, oh, that's God's judgment on them. But I guarantee you, out of all of those houses, the hundreds of houses, and maybe even the people that perished, like there were some good God-fearing people. And so you just got to go, why do bad things happen to good people, specifically in the areas of natural disasters? So this is not our first foray into natural disasters. We were there at Katrina. I was there at the tsunami in Sri Lanka. We've been in major wars in Kosovo, and we helped out in Ukraine. We sent 2 shipping containers of aid to Ukraine. And so, like, we're not, like, this isn't anything new. It's kind of interesting that, we're a little bit closer to it. One, it's in our country, and two, like, it's in literally a city that my family owns property in. So it feels a little closer to home. My dad had to go 2 days without eating, and he had to get food from the food bank. So an organization, much like his own organization, Kid Care, actually fed him a meal. And so, like, it's all very sobering. And when Katrina hit, when New Orleans was drowned, there was this how do I say this? This Christian voice that was saying, "Well, it's God's judgment on that sinful town," and like that's kind of hard. It's a hard thing to say, and in my opinion, it's an unfair thing to say because there are God fearing believers in New Orleans, and they don't deserve God's judgment. And so, like, if we were to apply that same logic that, this is that disasters are God's judgment upon ungodly people, then what's the deal with Las Vegas? How come an earthquake hasn't swallowed up Las Vegas by now? And so, like, in my opinion, it's not fair to place that kind of judgment. There's all we could use our imagination, and we can bring up all kinds of reasons why Lahaina burned, and we could say, well, it was because uh, of the whaling industry, because they slaughtered a bunch of whales there, and they sold them in that port, and that's why. So that's God's judgment, nature's judgment on them. We could say it was because of colonization, right? So the colonizers and the missionaries that took the land away from the people. That's God's judgment. I don't think logically any of those arguments apply, and I think the only thing that I can do, the only reasonable thing that I can do, is say I don't know. It is a terrible, terrible situation. It's a terrible tragedy, and sometimes things just don't make sense. So I think we need to be okay with that. Like, our mind is going to say, I need to make this rational. I need to understand the situation. Our human inclination is to want to put a solution to the problem, to say, okay, this is why this happened. A plus B equals C, and that's why this terrible thing happened. And unfortunately, in life, and specifically in spiritual terms, that's usually not how things play out. And so we're dealing with a destruction that, they say that this fire is the worst that the nation has ever seen. We're dealing with destruction that's unparalleled in our experience. And what do you do with that? So that's the illustration for us today, is Lahaina and all these natural disasters. Like, that's the illustration. And it's difficult, like, when, and Lahaina, again, it's like a cute little gem of a town, or it was a cute little gem of a town. It was precious, and it's been taken from us. I was there. Let's see. I think I went on vacation 2 years ago, so that was the last vacation I took, and then we spent a couple of weeks in Lahaina, and it was a beautiful time. And in Lahaina, there are a number of tourist shops and great restaurants, knick-knack shops, and a number of galleries. Some kitschy galleries and some high-end galleries. There's one gallery that no longer exists. It's called the Lahaina Printworks, and in this gallery, they have prints of maps from Captain Cook. I mentioned this last week on the podcast. I think I got it wrong. They have a very. When I was there, I asked the owner, what's your highlight? What's your best piece? What do you have in here that you think is the best? And so he pulls out the tattooed woman holding a rose. And so this was his treasure in the gallery. The tattooed woman holding a rose. I think last week I said it was by Picasso. It's not by Picasso. It's by Andy Warhol. So we'll bring a picture up of it, and it's before he gets into his pop art. But this piece is actually an important piece because Warhol is kind of in a traditional setting, but then he begins to play around with a critique / attack on commercialism and on advertising. And so on this very traditional, 1880s looking woman with the tattooed body, you're going to see like logos of corporations. So it's actually quite brilliant. And he'll go on from this idea of putting logos and tattooing them on bodies to the soup can thing, and the Burlow pad boxes and such. And so he's really going to go after the whole mass marketing and advertising and consumer Americans as consumers. But it's fascinating that he tattoos it on a woman first, or at least that's the print. And so it's a great piece, and it's a famous piece. It's a world famous piece. It's a lithograph, so there's a handful of them floating around, and the print shop or the print works in Lahaina had one of them, and I just looked up the value of it. It's a $50,000 piece. So if you were to go to Christie's or Sotheby's and try to buy this, at least a few years ago, I don't know what it would be worth now. You'd have to cough up $50,000 to buy this piece of art. Now that we've lost one, the value of them have gone up. So there's only a few left, and unfortunately, one was lost in this fire. Like how sad is that? And that was just one piece, and they had tons of prints in there that were just incredible. And so, if you go to their website, they shut down their website, and they just basically said it's all gone. They're not even paying to have the site hosted right now. They just have a memo saying that the shop's completely burned to the ground. All of our works are gone. We're very sorry. And that's their statement on the website. It's just heartbreaking. And like dealing with a loss of something precious is, I mean, like it's nauseating. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's probably one of the biggest shocks to the system to lose something beautiful and just to have it go up in flames. Um, so maybe I talked about my painting that I ripped the other day in my last podcast. So I mean, maybe you can't quite relate to something like that, but maybe you broke a vase that you liked, or you know maybe you dented your car. So if you're a car person and you're always polishing your car and you accidentally, dented it or crashed it, that feeling, even though you're okay, your baby's not okay. And it is, again, it's a nauseating feeling. So what do we do in situations like that? Just this week, I had a call from a parishioner, and really good guy, solid man of faith, faithful, um, great family, great family guy, just awesome, and very positive, very supportive. And he suffered a loss, and he called me up, like dealing with a financial loss that would make most of our heads spin. It would be like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't, you know, he was playing the market a little bit, but basically he got scammed, and he got robbed. And like the loss of a large monetary sum, like it's a big kick in the gut. But as a individual, as a father, as a husband, as a provider, he was dealing with levels of shame and embarrassment and uh, doubt and fear and just brokenness from one situation, from one loss, major loss. Don't get me wrong, major loss, major kick in the groin there. And and so it's like, how do you minister, how do you counsel somebody through a situation that is that devastating, and it it not only attacks your identity as a provider, but it even attacks your ability to provide. It attacks your self confidence and your self esteem. It's a hard thing. But even more difficult than that was the um, attack on faith. So again, this is the art of faith. This is the art of destruction. And so when you lose something that precious or something that valuable, when you maybe when you even lose a loved one, I've got friends that they've lost their children, and like how do you reconcile that? And what it does, loss is that devastating and that big. They play on your faith, like they go after your faith. And so the question that I was presented with, that I had to field from this individual that lost, that or had stolen from him a large amount of money. I had the question was, I was putting my faith and I was trusting in God. And why would God lead me down this path just for me to get ripped off? And like what, like I can't answer those types of questions. Why would God send me down this path, just to be misled? Why would God have me buy this house just to have it burned down in a fire? Like these are like I can't answer those types of questions. And so the big temptation when you lose something valuable to you is that you're going to blame God, or you're going to ask God why. And I don't necessarily think that is wrong to ask God why, because we're human and we're dealing with loss and pain. So I think that it's fair, and I think God could take it. I think it's okay to say, God, why did this happen? You might even be able to complain a little bit and say, God, why did you allow this to happen? But what we don't want to do, this is the hard part about faith. What we don't want to do is we don't want to blame God for misfortune. Like, again, back to the natural disaster thing. We don't want to blame God for the fire. We don't want to say God did this. That's God's judgment. Like that's not going to get us, and it's not going to get God anywhere either. We don't want to say God allowed the hurricane and Katrina to come in. So like these are the things that we don't want to do. And so when something bad happens to us personally, we don't want to say, well, God did this. And my assumptions were right all along. God's just a mean, angry father, and he's out to punish me for not being good enough or something like that. And so those are the areas that we need to resist, that those are the mindsets that we need to reject. We need to hold captive every thought, make those obedient to Christ, and not allow those lies to seep in, even in the midst of pain. So my advice, so my the this person that I was ministering to, they lost a large amount of money. They did not lose their home. They did not lose a loved one. And so they do have things to be thankful for, and you know, compared to the situation in Lahaina. Um, when that question was presented to me, why would God lead me down this path? And why would I think that there were certain open doors that weren't open doors that turned out to be traps? How come I couldn't see those, and how come I couldn't hear God's voice? And so again, my response was like, I don't know, but we serve a God that 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 wants to be relational, and that wants to restore what the enemy has taken. And so my advice to him, and the best advice that I could give, is to say to him, okay, first off, don't blame God. Uh, Feel free to be upset and disappointed and ask the questions why. But whatever you do, don't lose relationship with the Lord in whatever way. So just keep on talking, just keep on being relational. So you want to make it like the conversations might seem like they're going one way, but you need to continue to be relational, and you need to continue to stay connected to the body of Christ, the general counsel of God. And this theme of losing and losing things that are precious is a theme that is in the scriptures over and over and over again. And In Isaiah 61, it's a beautiful passage. I'm going to read this. You know, if you're listening and if you're faith based, if you're an armchair theologian, you're probably going to think that this is heresy because I'm going to read it from the Message paraphrase. We'll go ahead and just call it a paraphrase, okay? And that way I won't get myself in too much trouble. But I want us to hear Isaiah 61 from a different voice and from a different perspective because, again, we're dealing with the problem of evil and the problem of pain. And how do we process that as Christians? And so, from the Message version, from Isaiah 61, it's going to sound familiar, but again, it's a different translation. Paraphrase says this: The Spirit of God, the Master, is on me because God anointed me. So God's with us. He's on us, even in the midst. And we're like, this is being read and written from a point of pain, right? He has sent me to preach good news to the poor and to heal the brokenhearted and to announce freedom to all captives and to pardon all prisoners. God sent me to announce the year of his grace, a celebration of God's destruction of our enemies, and to comfort all who mourn, to care for the needs of all who mourn in Zion, and to give them a bouquet of roses instead of ashes. Give them a bouquet of roses instead of ashes. And I'm going to direct you right back to that image of the tattooed lady that's holding the rose, and so she's holding something beautiful, even though her body is tattooed with marketplace advertising. To comfort all those who mourn, to care for the needs of all those that mourn in Zion, to give them a bouquet of roses instead of ashes. Messages of joy instead of news of doom. A praising heart instead of a languid spirit. Rename them oaks of righteousness, planted by God to display his glory. They'll rebuild the old ruins, raise a new city out of the wreckage. They'll start over on the ruined city. They'll take the rubble left behind and make it new. You'll hire outsiders to herd your flocks and foreigners to work your fields. But you'll have the title, priests of God, honored as ministers of God. You'll feast on the bounty of nations and you'll bask in their glory. Because you are a doubled dose of trouble and more than your share of contempt. Your inheritance in the land will be doubled and your joy go on forever. And so Isaiah 61 is a powerful promise that when there's ashes, you're going to receive beauty. When there is rubble, it's going to become new. The old wrecked city will be rebuilt. You will receive provision and resources from the outside that you did not expect. You're expecting to do all the work. You're going to receive resources that are coming from the outside. I mean, this is all for the glory of God. That's kind of the condition is that we have to give glory to God whenever He comes through, and it is an inheritance. And I believe that what this scripture is saying is that if we're faithful in the midst of destruction, so this is the art of the whole thing. If we're faithful in the midst of the destruction, our inheritance, our land, our blessing will be doubled and will go on. It's another major theme in all of the scriptures. And so, first off, in closing, let's be thankful and grateful for what we have right now. Our houses weren't burned. Our lives weren't taken. Our loved ones weren't lost. And so, we're sucking air right now. So at least we have something to be thankful for. So we can at least start with a thankful attitude that we are where we're at right now. But come what may, we need to continue to have this positive mindset that says, okay, no matter what takes place, whenever I whenever I'm tempted to curse God, I won't curse God. I will be like Job. I won't curse God, but I'll suffer through. And then when the time comes to rebuild, I will be that oak of righteousness whose roots have gone deep into the ground, beyond the fire and beyond the destruction. So you might be burned on the outside, but if your roots are deep, if you're planted in his righteousness, if you've been discipled in the word of God, you're going to survive any major catastrophe that takes place. And then again, his promises is that we're going to feast on the bounty of nations. So, yeah, you might be going through a hard time. If you're not, you will be. And I want to encourage you just to stay relational with God, stay relational in his word, and just believe that no matter what takes place, he is for you and not against you. As soon as you start cursing God, then you're going to release him from blessing you. And we just don't want to do that. And so resist that temptation to curse God, to blame God, to say that this is God's fault, this is God's doing. Just resist that temptation to do that and say, God, I don't understand what's going on. I'm hurting. This sucks. I don't like losing beautiful things. I don't like taking major losses. And I mean, those are okay things to vent, but to say, I will continue. I will continue to praise your name. And then to see God make something beautiful out of ashes, beauty for ashes. I hope that was encouraging. And again, one of the things about the Church of Jesus Christ is that, we stand up and we support each other. And again, we're cutting the check tomorrow. So by the time you see this, you're not going to have a time to give or get in on that giving. I'll just redirect you to King's Cathedral Church in Maui. They're going to continue to do good stuff. If you want to bless our housekeeper, reach out to me and I'll make sure she gets whatever donation you want to give us. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Our subscriptions are coming up, so thank you so much. So subscribe and follow our other accounts and join us on Sunday. We'd love to see you. God bless. Thanks you for listening and watching the Art of Faith podcast.